Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have a great Q&A right now with the director of the current war, Alfonso Gomez-Rejon. Alfonso, first of all, it's great to see you.
Great to see you again.
My first question really is when you made Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, right? Yes, let's hear from Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. So what specifically were you looking for your film after that?
I was working on a couple of things that didn't quite come together, and then I made a pilot that was like a labor of love. That was a thing called Citizen that I always thought was going to be my first film 100 years ago. And things were taking a while to come together, and I almost made another movie. And then I read this one, and at first I didn't see any kind of connection with, and we're interested in like making a movie about electricity. But I started thinking about it in different terms, and it wasn't about Edison and Westinghouse. It was ego and humility, and how far a man will go to be remembered. And looking at it now, I think with a little time I've seen, I can see some a lot of connections to Me and Earl, and which is so much about grief. And this one is so much about Edison trying to defy nature and keep his wife alive, and using motion pictures. And there's some connections there that it took me a while to see, but they're very clear now, which makes it even more personal. And so this whole release has been, it's been such a journey, so the release has been quite emotional.
You know, the scope of this film is obviously a whole lot bigger than Me and Earl. So what were initially the hurdles and challenges that you faced in taking on something that was bolder and bigger?
It was a studio movie and a lot of personalities and opinions but it was, so there was an art to navigating that, but ultimately it just comes down to you looking into an actor's eye on set, you know, and try to get to the truth of a scene. And with great preparation, with some friends and family that made Me and Earl with me, David Trachtenberg, the editor, Chung Woon Chung, the cinematographer, they came along for the ride. You know, you feel more comfortable because you have a safety net there, and you had these big ideas of how to make a period movie that felt like the future, not the past, and interpreting the past to maybe getting closer to what it might have felt like, as opposed to reproducing it exactly the way it was. And so yeah, that was it was a bigger scale, and that was always very exciting. You know, when you're a kid thinking of making movies, you always think it's Gone with the Wind or something massive. Yeah, sure. So it's always fun to get lost in that world, but ultimately it just comes down to you looking into an actor's eyes.
Well, when you have these two main guys, you know, Edison and Westinghouse, you know, you're watching the film and they're only together for like one scene. It's like one and a half. It's like Heat, the movie Heat, with Pacino and De Niro, and like when you came to casting, what were you looking for initially? Like what made Michael Shannon the perfect Westinghouse, and what made Benedict Cumberbatch the perfect Edison?
It was a contemporary American feel to the piece, and Benedict was already attached to the film. To the project. So when I met on the project, I met with him, and then we Skyped, and I went to London, and we talked to make sure we were seeing the same film. I told him how I saw it and how I saw Westinghouse, and how I saw Edison, and once you have him, and we were in sync, and then it was about casting the right couple opposite him, and had Alan Lewis, the great casting director, cast this movie with Theo Park in London. And the first meeting was, this is a great rock and roll couple, because all my references were concert films for this. David Bailey photography and Maisels and Pennebaker. I wanted to do something that had a lot of that musicality to it, interesting. Okay. And you know, Bowie was Tesla. It was a reference for Tesla, not for the look and the men who felt Earth, Nick Rowe kind of a thing. And she said, I have the great rock and roll couple for you, Michael Shannon and Catherine Waterston. And it just made sense. And it also Americanizes Benedict in some ways, and it was just about keeping them in the same kind of universe. So that I knew I was going to be intercutting between these two storylines, and you want to make sure everyone had that vibe that was very contemporary.
One thing I really loved about film is the cinematography. Chung, just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous film. How did you land this awesome cinematography?
Chung shot me and Earl, and then Chung shot something else for me, and we're about to work together again. He's just came out of nowhere for me and Earl. I was interviewing photographers, and I'm a big fan of his work, and Park Chan-wook's films, and he didn't make sense for that film, but he is the funniest guy on the planet, and always talks about character, and really gets what we wanted, how I think about just the craft, and for this one we storyboarded the whole film and then threw it out, and it just except for certain sequences where, like the Chicago World's Fair, they're very carefully designed. We didn't have a lot of money to make this film, and then we just went into it, and this is all the departments. Jan Rolf's production design, David, and with editing, and Michael Wilkinson's beautiful costumes, about breaking rules, because we were making a movie about the future, about these three men. They were the original disruptors, and almost wanted to make a movie that honored them and their ambition and that energy and then musicality of it, that you wanted to kind of create something and then deconstruct it. And so we always wanted to break some rules, and so even we carefully designed everything. We would walk into it, and I always felt like, again, I had that net, so that if it gave me the freedom to just be with to work on the performances and be present for them.
Benedict and Michael Shannon they're phenomenal actors, and they're also very different, have very different approaches to the craft. I was wondering, what impressed you about each of these guys, and what surprised you?
Well, they're very much AC/DC, in real life.
Yeah.
They really are. So, and Benedict, it shot like 2 movies. We shot the Edison movie, and then shot the Westinghouse movie, and they had one moment in the courtroom scene, but they don't say anything to each other, and then the big scene at the end. And so they just need different things, and my job is to get the best, create the best atmosphere that's safe for them and allow them to create and go on that journey together. But Benedict had the benefit of a little more rehearsals, because he was the first to go, and we were in London. He was free, and Shannon was working on a different film that went over a bit, so he was late coming. But he comes from the theater, so he really respected the text. So we would just talk about the text and talk about the scene every day, and do like a mini rehearsal every day, just to be in sync. But they just both kind of surrendered to me and the project, and did a lot of research. So they need different things, and I just hopefully create an environment where they could fly and create.
So when I saw this movie for the first time, it was in September of 2017.
PTSD.
Okay. And it was a very different film. And so this is September of 2017. And then 1 month later, a whole lot changed. Harvey Weinstein, that whole thing blew up, and the movie's distributor at the time was the Weinstein Company. So what happened after October to you and to the movie?
I mean, it's a great dinner we could all have together. And but no, we could. I mean, it leading up to TIFF is a fantastic story, and then post TIFF is about trauma, and then how the power of one screening, how it was meant to be a work in progress. And I went into it knowing that I had lost a lot of battles, and it was heavily compromised. And still a little bit of hope that there was still 3 months to go before the release. And then that screening just defined it, and then you lose a lot of leverage after something like that. And then new cuts we were constantly battling about versions of the film, and there was a fear of making Benedict unlikable, which was the kiss of death at times, and over-explaining. All that could go wrong when a filmmaker kind of would lose his vision and his control over a film, and then 2 weeks later it all implodes, and it's frozen in time. And that's painful, not knowing what's going to happen to your film, knowing that you've lost control of your film, but always dreaming that you can maybe get it back because it wasn't released yet. So it was worth the fight, and the fight lasted over a year, and always. But the silence was a gift in hindsight. In the moment, it's horrible.
Not in the moment.
No,
I
but in hindsight,
understand.
it gave me a chance to the ideas kind of settle, and you realize where you lost your way. And the movie, you get excited about the movie that you always wanted to make and potentially could still make.
So here's the thing. So when you have a film that says like the current war director's cut, and then you have a film like Blade Runner director's cut or Apocalypse Now director's cut, you know, Blade Runner has like so many cuts. I lost count at 6 or 5. I don't know. See what I mean? But in this case, your cut is the version that people are really seeing in terms of the general public for the first time. And like talk about like having an objective, fresh approach to completely reconfigure this movie. Who came to your rescue?
Well, there's a lot of people. My mother's in the audience. She rescued me. She was the first to rescue me.
Hey, Mom.
No, look, I had a very incredible. I have a great team of representatives, and one of them had worked with Harvey for many, many years, decades. And even though I had final cut language in my deal, he sometimes or often doesn't honor that or respect that. So just in case something went wrong, and everything went wrong, Scorsese was who I had, he had mentored me he's been in my life for a while.
That's Martin.
Yes,
Scorsese.
Sal, his cousin.
Yeah.
And he was the clause that said if everything went wrong with the film, that Scorsese would get final cut, not Harvey, and not even me. And I said I was okay with that because it would never come to that, and then it came to that. And a year later, I kept thinking and alienating a lot of people in my life, and people that are very close to me telling me to just drop it and move on, but I couldn't let it go. It wasn't ripped away from me yet, and I kept thinking of how to make it better and how to get back to the film I always wanted to make, and had all the scenes on my desk, and I would jot down notes and had the storyboards for them just in case I got that call. And instead of a call, I woke up and just looked at trades or something like that, and I know exactly that, and the movie was getting a release internationally. And we all called each other and had no idea which version of the movie, what. No one knew anything.
Amazing.
And so we were able to stop that because Scorsese technically, legally never got his final cut, so it wasn't a final cut of the film. Mm-hmm. And we stopped everything. Scorsese got his final cut, and he gave it right back to me. And then eventually I found myself in the editing room with David looking at footage I hadn't seen in a year, and going back and seeing your mistakes and reliving that moment in time. Again, it's especially the music is so powerful. This is a different score, but that score...
The score is amazing.
Yeah, Danny Bensine and Sonarjurians. And but you hear a piece of music, even today, we could all go back to a breakup with a piece of music. And it's very powerful. So there's a lot of those feelings. And little by little started taking it back and steering it back to where it was supposed to be, which is very close to the very, very original cuts of the film, and then realizing we needed a few more scenes and getting the cast together for one more day and shooting a handful of scenes.
How was that? How difficult was that to get the cast back for some of that?
It wasn't as difficult. It was difficult. Benedict has a mustache. That's drama. What are we going to do? So you just time it to where he's going to finish this film before he goes on to the next thing, and he's going to shave. And then that Saturday, everybody else was free too, and then we just found ourselves within a month of getting the footage back, maybe 6 weeks, in a farmhouse outside of London, and shooting this student film of 5 scenes with Benedict in one room and Nick Hoult in the other room, and it was great fun that everyone got together just to support this kind of rebirth and this new phase of the film, and seeing it until the end.
So you go on set to do principal photography on a movie that you had filmed, a year and a half before. I mean,
it felt great. It felt great.
Okay, good.
It felt great. It was a very surreal set of circumstances that in post-production, just when you think it was hard, it got harder and cruel. Got worse, and then the studio head vanishes, and then the studio collapses, and then it was just very surreal. But it did allow for a second chance. The worst part of the story would have been that old version would be the one that would be out, and the movie would come and go, and that would be it, and that would define me, and the people that took the journey with me, that I felt a responsibility for.
The things that I noticed from the first to the second cut were, first of all, the movie, the pacing is much more seamless, and it's a faster movie. There's more energy to it. There's more urgency to it. The story is more engrossing and absorbing. Only great things. But the other thing I noticed is that the character of Edison, I remember he was a lot more abrasive, for lack of a better term, in the newer cut, and a little, I guess, less likable, But not that I think that made for a better film.
Having two nice guys fight it out, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Especially when you had voiceover explaining, how he felt in every scene. But so it was nice because Edison, this is the version of Edison that Benedict and I agreed on, warts and all. We wanted to go there, as long as he understood why he went there, and that's why his relationship with Mary is so important. And when she's gone, you that person that would center him and press like reset, and that moral compass is gone, then ambition would then take over. But it did allow to explore that side of myself as well, and it's clearer here that not only the ambition, but this kind of trying to define nature and try to understand and process grief and being in denial. And even at the end of the last scene of the film in the movie theater, where yes, he lost Niagara, so he just took it right back from them. And 2, he trapped nature again in a box. And 3, it's storytelling. He's recording a memory of his wife where they honeymooned, and still in denial, but still moving forward and looking ahead. There was a lot to him that I really love, that character and that interpretation of Edison.
At what point during, round 2, when you're editing between the version that existed and reconfiguring that with the reshoots, and then with the new score, at what point did you start to feel like, okay, now I'm happy?
I don't think I ever get to that point, but no, I do. I'm very proud of it. It's a triumph for everybody that made this film to win and still be here and standing. There was a time, I think, when we started getting the first few cues from Danny and Sonder that it was exactly the sound that I wanted, and everything starts to come together. And then losing babies that I loved for all the wrong reasons, and I'd maybe been holding on to them, and I needed that distance, and all of a sudden the energy started to flow, and then the tiniest little change at the very end of the last thing we changed not that long ago was when Edison's son looks through the kinetoscope and sees his mom that used to be his sister, and the last moment was, no, it has to be his wife. It has to be his mom, but it has to be Benedict's wife. She's now alive still, and he's been obsessing over her this entire time, and now she's in motion. And they just added a whole other layer that I felt kind of when we cut it in there. It just kind of, I felt some real emotion, and I felt what he was feeling, and it added another dimension to him because he's gone to the dark side, and he's made so many poor choices, horrible choices, but there's still that humanity in him. If you can connect with that, then maybe you can see a bit of yourself as well, and I thought that worked.
The other thing that I really connected to is that line, he says, it's not currents, it's currency, right? And you're just seeing just how these guys are opportunists, they have raging egos, and they are capitalists, they are definitely, it's not about the discovery, the invention of the current and the power. It's about currency, and could it be any more modern than that?
Yeah, and that scene that was important. That also was my worst nightmare. That scene of that was written for this new phase of the film because that was the fear of dying a dreamer, which was happening to Tesla at that time, in that moment, in that scene. and your voice is being ripped away. You're never going to be that person. You're going to die a dreamer, and you're an immigrant. So that meant that worked, I think, well. And yeah, it is, I think, relevant. And you have Branson and Musk and Bezos racing to the moon, but I don't know who's going to be remembered in 100 years and why.
Right, exactly. I want to open up to the audience for questions, but one more thing I just want to ask: when you finally had your director's cut set, what did like Michael Shannon, what did Benedict Cumberbatch think of the new version?
Saw it Monday.
Yeah, what
no, it's been a very emotional. It's been a great time. They're very proud of it.
Big hugs.
A lot of hugs.
Yes.
Maybe some tears. So.
Oh, nice. Sir, you had a question. Yeah.
What role did Marty play? I'm a friend of his.
Exactly that role. He gave me the gift of freedom to be able to work and recut the film. He gave notes along the way, along with Thelma Schoonmaker. Not often. He was prepping The Irishman. But he saw 2 or 3 cuts of it and gave the greatest notes because it's Scorsese giving you notes. So they're clear, they're not prescriptive the way a studio would be, like do these 30 things. He would fought for me. There was a moment where we might have lost the Civil War flashbacks, and he believed in them as much as I did. There were some sequences where he gave me ideas, but it was the thing about him which makes him so great and such a giant is that generosity, and he understands that it's not his film, it's your film. So he can maybe give you notes the way another colleague might, but his notes are always going to be better because it's him. But what he did was give me that gift of freedom. It's not that he took the movie away because he had final cut. He just handed it over to me because it's my, after that entire episode, it's like your chance to get it back to what you think is the best version for you, and supporting me along the way. So the gift of freedom is it's.
Were you in New York? Was Thelma and Marty in New York?
No, they were always in New York. We cut in London, we cut in LA, cut in London, cut a little in New York, but mainly there were a couple of meetings. Thelma came over to the cutting room once, but Thelma's been a friend and a mentor, and I talk to her weekly about everything. So she was able to, they're the greatest friends and mentors you would wish for, especially when you go through something like this. They gave you so what did Marty do? Something only that Marty can, which is the freedom to another filmmaker. That's the greatest gift.
Got time for one more question, and it's yours. What's your question?
How did you come to the story originally?
Not a very interesting story. When I was looking I wanted to read things that were out there, as some of the things that I was working on were taking a little bit longer to gel. And the movie, the script had made the blacklist, and so it was submitted to me just to read, just like a sample, really, from Michael Mitnick's. And again, at first I only saw the top layer. Then I started seeing everything else that I could kind of latch onto personally. Then he and I met, and we kept talking about it, and then I was fully in.
So, after everything you went through to make this movie now, the version that you got to, your cut of it, moving forward, what's something you're going to be super careful about so something like this never happens again?
I mean, it can. I mean, I think it's all about why put something out in the world, why make something, and it's worth the fight. It's worth dying for and fighting for. And as long as it's clear, if it wasn't so clear and it was a gig, I would have moved on a long time ago, but I couldn't. And so I think, and I hope that everyone is as passionate about everything else I make in the future, so that you're prepared for the biggest fight, and hopefully it won't be this bad. But it's all worth fighting for it, and it's very, so you have to be really clear why you're making it and why you're putting this out in the world.
Well, thank you for not moving on until you were ready to move on. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, and please spread the word about the current war. Have a great night. Thanks so much, Alfonso. Thank you.